Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the REP podcast. I am so incredibly excited for today's episode. I have a very dear friend of mine and someone who I revere and respect so much with me today. Her name is Claire Bradshaw, and Claire is a holistic life and mindset coach. And we met probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. We were just chatting before I pressed record at a mutual friend's house. And through the practice of yoga, I got to know each other a little bit more. And even though I've only known Claire for 5 years, 5, 6 years, I feel like she is a sister from another lifetime ago. I feel so connected with her. I feel like our paths are always so beautifully aligned. And I also feel like I can call Claire with anything that's going on in my life, and she can hold space for me without judgment, without me needing to explain myself in any way that I don't feel comfortable to doing. And I'm just so glad that I get to share her with you today. So thank you so much for saying yes, Claire. I'm so happy to have you here. And yeah, so much love for you, babe.
Oh, thank you, Ari. What a beautiful, I felt all of that. I felt all of the heart stuff. It was like, it was making me tingle all over. So thank you. And, you know, the feeling's absolutely mutual. So it's an absolute honor to be on your podcast today.
Oh, thanks, babe. Excuse me, I asked you to join me on my podcast for two really important reasons. Firstly, both you and I have started in the yoga industry, teaching yoga, being very interested in holistic health and lifestyle and the practices of yoga in general. And what we have both done over the last few years is taken those practices and created not only beautiful, expansive lives through those practices, but also embodied them in a way that has had us hold space for others to experience those practices too. And we've done that both in a class setting and also in a mentorship or a coaching setting as well. So that's the first reason, because I'm just really interested in talking to you about what your experience has been through that transition. And secondly, because we are going through, this process right now through everything that's happening with COVID and all of the traumas that are being experienced collectively and all the shadows that are coming to the light. And I'm really interested to get your take on how you feel about this, what you've been seeing, and just to riff on that a little bit. So I'm hoping that both of those subjects are okay with you. And
I love it. I love it.
Okay. So firstly, let's talk a little bit about your transition from the studio to the online coaching space. What was it that initially had you move from teaching yoga in a studio to wanting to take those practices and hold space for them in a coaching setting?
So I'll kind of start, I suppose, 7 years ago when I was in my yoga teacher training, because it's very much kind of actually started at that point. 7 years ago, I did a yoga teacher training in India, and it was a profound experience for me. And on that teacher training, not only did I experience the feeling of a lot of emotions that I had been storing inside of myself that I wasn't even aware of started coming up to the surface. And I started to be able to see myself with it from a different perspective. Memories from the past were coming up, experiences were coming up, and I started to have much more clarity as to how I have been performing or playing in my own life. And the things that I had said that weren't great to other people, the experiences that I'd received from other people, things people had said, just all of these types of things just started slowly and gently coming up to the surface. Not in a way, though, that was me feeling guilty or feeling bad. It wasn't from an ego perspective of pulling me down. It was more just giving me absolute clarity and perspective over my life. And I'd never had that experience before. And it was deeply, deeply healing. Also on that training, I got really sick and I ended up going to hospital and I nearly died. And I had a profound spiritual experience in a hospital in India. And I had an experience of absolute unity, which at the time when I was doing my yoga teacher training, I didn't realize that that was actually a profound spiritual experience. But I was able to experience literally in only a few hours an experience of being so full of fear, so full of terror, so full of poor me, victim kind of feeling, which obviously was, you know, it was warranted. Like it was a scary situation, but I went from that darkness all the way up to absolute gratitude, love, and unity, and all from the same bed. So my external situation hadn't changed, but something inside of me had. And I'd never had that experience before because I had always been running in my life from experiences that I didn't like and thinking I had to change the external to change how I felt. And I realized at that point that actually, no, you can actually have the experience of changing within yourself, even though the external stays the same. Profound. It took me a while to really integrate that, though. I'm not saying it all happened like that. And so from that experience, even though I did my yoga teacher training, you know, because I was really deeply interested in yoga, I hadn't actually previous to that had a plan to become a yoga teacher. However, at the end of my teacher training, I was like, I have to teach this. It has changed my life and I have to teach from that place. But as I was unraveling all of this, I started to think about how can I take this even further? How can I really help support people with these transformations that I've been experiencing off the mat as well? So that it wasn't just contained in a 1-hour yoga class. Whilst that can be great and it's deeply healing, how can I take it to the next level and really support people to create big transformation in their life? So that's when I started to study. I studied holistic health coaching and you know, whilst also doing a lot of deep work myself, found coaches and mentors in my own life, continued on my studies, and then started to work with clients who, a lot of, you know, yogis, whether it's yoga teachers or people who've been practicing yoga for a while, and they were starting to experience changes, or they were starting to find that some of those maybe, you know, small traumas or different things, they're starting to see things from a different perspective, but they didn't have anyone to speak to and help process that. Or they were wanting something more from their life and they didn't know what that was. And so I started to coach people and hold space for people as they were exploring and unraveling these things for themselves. And, you know, and then as time has gone on, I started to feel the limitations of the yoga studio. So I was finding that whilst I love holding space for people, and it has been deeply helpful for my own personal journey and also with my coaching to be able to hold the space and to guide groups of people, I found that I wasn't able to take people deeper to really help them to transform in their lives. And I was noticing so many yoga students who were coming to yoga for years and years and years, but they were getting frustrated because they weren't seeing the changes in their life that they wanted. So that's kind of the long story, but that's kind of how it's all evolved over time.
Gosh, what a profound experience. And I can't even imagine how scary it would have been to be in another country being so sick. But the sweetness of having had a unified experience in the depths of that dark physical experience, like, would have been really contrasting, and therefore the profundity of that comes up, right?
Yeah, and what I really felt in that moment as well, and it's something that I really connect in with as I'm coaching my clients because it's such an embodied experience, was this sense of we are always held.
Yes, we are.
Because what I felt in that moment of absolute despair and terror and fear and all of the emotions, I felt a sense of being held, and I felt like if I think about an image of the feeling, it was like being a baby that was being cradled.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. And how much
And
is
that
that?
everything is okay.
Everything is okay. And how much of that is actually holding you in good stead right now?
So much, because it's something that I continue to come back to every time that a sense of fear comes over or a thought comes over. It's to know that everything is okay, even though, you know, the world can feel like it's falling apart. I don't have to fall down with that thought.
Yeah, and you don't have to control it either, you know.
No.
It's just a sense of allowing and surrendering. I call it the art of active surrender, because it's not just like you're throwing your hands up in the air thinking, you know, I don't know what to do anymore. It's that you're actively allowing yourself the surrender of being in the moment and of things not being clear and things not being maybe even peaceful for you, and then that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's such an important distinction, because I think, you know, when we talk in yoga, when we talk about surrender, it can be taken from that kind of apathetic kind of like, oh, well, you know, like that means then I don't care, and, you know, all of that. And it's not that. It's actually profoundly different to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. One of the things that you said was that through your yoga practice, you noticed how your emotions came up to the surface. And this is something that I'm really interested in talking about right now, because, you know, I've started to do a few videos myself and just processing this understanding of how, as Tara Bach says, the issues are in your tissues, right? And I think you even recommended that book to me, Radical Compassion by Tara Bach, and this whole idea of how our problems, our suppressions, these emotional stagnancies that we don't necessarily experience through our lives, that we suppress and hold down, they store themselves in our bodies. And once we start to do a practice like yoga, where we're not only putting ourselves in certain shapes and allowing the breath to lead our movement and creating this really sacred embodiment of lineage, how with all of that comes the very necessary upheaval of anything that does not serve us, and how this just generally comes out of the body. And the amount of times I've taught a class where I've had, and myself been on the mat, where I've had what I call the yoga cry. You know, you finish a practice or you're in a deep hip opener or something like that, and you are just beside yourself, not really knowing how to control yourself, or you're having a shavasana cry, which is sometimes really embarrassing in a class that's having a silent shavasana. And I'm really interested in this because I don't know if enough people speak about this as part of the yoga practice. It is a very sacred practice, and it is something that we all come to feel at one with, and many different lineages will speak very differently about what the yoga practice is for them. But ultimately, as human beings in a 3D reality, we do have this experience of whatever's stored inside generally coming out. Can you speak a little bit to your experience with this, not only personally, but also as a teacher?
Yeah, I love this so much, because when I had the experience, and I agree with you, like, not enough people are talking about it, because, you know, when I had that experience, I was like, what is going on? Like, this is kind of a bit freaky. Why am I crying? Why am I getting angry? Why am I getting frustrated? Why are all of these emotions coming? You know, all I'm doing is I'm like in a position, but all of this stuff is coming to the surface, and I'm hating on my teacher, and, you know, what is that? You know?
That's so true.
And you know, I think that when I first started doing serious yoga practice, I mean, initially it was just kind of like, oh, a bit of fun, I'll turn up to a yoga class here and there. And, you know, one of the things that actually made me super interested in doing my yoga teacher training was because I was a corporate chick in an office, and I was just full of so much anxiety and burnout and overwhelm and all of those things. But the only thing that would give me some respite outside of a bottle of wine, which wasn't serving me, was, or, you know, talking about it, ranting about it for a couple of hours to my husband every night. The only way where I get some respite was going to a yoga class. And I'd arrive and I'd feel full of all of the stuff. And then I'd finish the class feeling amazing. And that, all of that stuff that was in my mind, it didn't even matter anymore. And I was like, there is some alchemy that's occurred. There's some transformation that's occurred here. How can I feel terrible to feeling amazing just within 1 hour of moving my body? And so that's what led me to do the yoga teacher training in the first instance. And, you know, at the start of doing the yoga teacher training, because it was like Ashtanga, it was like 2 hours of practice every morning at 4:30. And it was really, really intense. I was hating on it. I was hating on it so much because you've got to hold these poses for 5 full breaths. And my body was aching, you know, it was the combination of the mind and the body. But what I started to notice is as I just started to settle a bit and to become okay with the experience and not resist it and not fight it, and then connecting more deeply in with my breath, so utilize the breath in the practice to help me drop into the body more and more, and to know that everything was okay, even though it wasn't comfortable. The more I did that, the more the practice started to bloom within me, the more that I started to tap into those deeper aspects of self, the memories, the layers, the stuff started to come to the surface, the more I started to have a much deeper spiritual experience, you know, going through the layers, the sheets, in the practice. And again, I'm talking about this more from retrospect, now understanding the experience I went through. I didn't know that at the time. And what was your other question? Sorry, I've forgotten what that was.
But that was so good, because it just led me onto something completely different that relates to that. Is that it's such a good analogy in that when we practice yoga, in my experience in speaking to many students, that cross the threshold from it being a merely physical practice to it being a spiritual practice, is that those that come for the physicality of it don't necessarily get to cross this to the other sector, the spirituality bit, only because they are running from the uncomfortability that comes, I don't know if that's a word, but I just made it up, the uncomfortability that comes from being on your yoga mat in a position, a pose, a strong posture, even a quiet posture. Let me just be completely transparent there, you know, a meditation, for example, that we're so busy running from those parts of self that we feel uncomfortable with, that in its very self is what stops us from crossing the bridge, from living a 3D life, from living a life that's very in the physical body, to living an alchemical, as you put it, life that's full of mystery. And I think what the yoga practice does that's so powerful is that it brings us into a physical practice that we can use our bodies, these incredible machines that we've been given, coupled with the mind, training the mind to follow a very clear structure and a very clear path to cross the bridge into allowing that feeling of, you know, being uncomfortable in a certain situation. And if I look now out in the world, you know, we're going through lockdowns and COVID this and all of the things that are going on. You look at all of those that have a strong spiritual practice, watch how they're coping with what's happening right now. Watch what they're doing. Watch how they're metabolizing the things that are happening. They're not just sitting down doing nothing about it. They still have a sense of sacred and spiritual activism about them, and they're you know, they're going for what they believe in, but they're not letting it affect them in a way that's depleting. right? And so I think that
Yeah.
this is a very clear distinction of what's happening in the world.
Mm.
Those who are going out in the world and like fighting and trying to fight the man and going, you know, balls to the wall, excuse my French, but those who are doing that are coming from a place of running, whereas those who are doing the sacred and spiritual activism are coming from a place of integration. Very different.
Totally. And I think, you know, and that's the thing, is that if we have not got a strong nervous system, if we haven't built that sense of strength, and I think about it like from the physical yoga practice, and I think about it from the perspective of, you know, I know Brené Brown talks about it, but I think it comes from somewhere else, about the strong back and the soft front.
She does, yes.
You know, and I think about you know, the yoga practice, it's all about that. It's all about building up the strength in the back line of the body, the support of the spine, the support for the structure of the physical body, and then this sense of dropping the shoulders, opening through the heart, creating space here, and the breath to soften this part of the body. And then through the physical, then you then start to see the impact that then has in terms of your whole being, and the way that you react, or not react, you don't react, the more you're able to have more agency over your responses, and you're able to connect to a sense of that observer part of self, where you're able to see things with this sense of clarity and perspective, rather than jumping into fight, that sense of, you know, something's happening, you know, the cause and effects, you know, the cause and effect, like complete reaction to what's occurring, rather than something's occurring, okay, I can see it, okay, how do I choose to then respond from this calm centered perspective, rather than just the innate kind of fight or flight, freeze kind of response that is so easy to go down if we haven't rooted ourselves into the earth and come into the physical body and have that kind of sense of stability.
Because we lose ourselves in that moment when we're reactive and we have these knee-jerk reactions. I almost feel like, and I'm not for one second saying that this doesn't happen to me, because I think, you know, of course it does. I still have a knee-jerk reaction, and I still get flustered and frustrated and upset. And when in those experiences, when I do that, I feel myself leaving my body. I feel like something just takes over, and I just take up residence somewhere outside of my body. And it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of courage, because sometimes it's it is courage to bring myself straight back and ground myself and center myself in a way that is going to be useful and helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Because that sense of something's occurring right now, and then we kind of go into that place of reaction, that sense of, I loved how you described it, you know, sense of almost jumping out of the body, and that sense of like, you know, dissociation. But I think that once you've built up that sense of awareness, then you can feel yourself doing it, right?
100%.
So there's still, even though there's a sense of I've left my body and I've gone into a place of reaction, but then there's this other aspect that can see it all occurring. So then you can help to then integrate it back.
Yes. I'm just having a thought about how this is, you know, potentially how a lot of numbing out occurs. You know, you leave your body and you're reacting to a stimuli that's happened, that's made you feel uncomfortable. And then in order to soothe yourself, you go and do the very thing that is counterintuitive and almost sabotaging of your wholeness. So whether it's drinking or drugging or just simply scrolling social media or going shopping, you know, any of these things are very classic numbing out examples, and they can totally take us outside of our body.
Yeah, totally. And that's, you know, it's that kind of coping mechanism. And I speak to a lot of clients about this, because, you know, addictions is such an issue in our society. And whilst we get that, you know, that immediate feeling of like, you know, that relief or whatever, that short-term gain, essentially, the long-term consequences of that over time are destructive, right?
Totally.
That's the pattern that I got into when I was in a corporate job that I was insanely unhappy with. And my coping mechanism at the time was to come back home and either rant to my husband for 2 hours, I knew that wasn't fair on him, but I didn't know how else to deal with it. Or I'd just go, oh, I need a glass of wine or 2 or 3 or 4. And then the pattern would start again with a coffee in the morning. And then I'd be running around all day and then finish off in the same way. And it wasn't until I started to kind of go, oh my God, I feel terrible. I'm getting sick. And surely there's something more. And these little questions started to come up. And that's really what initiated my whole journey and what led me to then seeing what was happening on that bed in India, to kind of go, oh my gosh, there's another way. There's another way that I hadn't seen, and that I didn't know anyone was talking about. And unfortunately, the way society is set up is that our economy is very much built on this being an issue, right? Because like the alcohol companies, McDonald's, like all the chocolate companies, like all of these really take good advantage of the fact that we don't necessarily have agency over this. So that's my way. So I want to help people with this, because you know, there's so much more to this human experience than a lot of us are experiencing.
Yeah. Gosh, that's a whole rabbit hole that we won't get into here, but you've touched on some really beautiful, important, very necessary facts on how the structure is built to keep us sick. Right? Yeah. Mentally, physically, in so many ways we see this, and it's unfolding now more than ever. And so, you know, along with agency and the ability to take control of our own emotions, feelings, our own bodies, it's so important for us to get into the rhythm of having a practice, spiritual, devotional, physical. It doesn't really matter what your practice is, as long as it is a practice. You know, I think it's just so important now, more than ever.
For sure. And just to add to that, Ari, you know, the message that I was getting really strongly last year was, it's time for us to all take our power back, to learn how to take really good care of our bodies, to understand how our bodies work. Because it's crazy thought of just like, we live in these bodies and most of us have no freaking idea how they work, how our brains work. Most of us aren't embodying or in our bodies, because we're in our minds all the time thinking about the past or the future and our worries and anxieties and stuff, that actually to have practices that help to bring us home to ourselves, where we start to still, where we start to have those deeper experiences. And then we're actually putting the body into this place where it can actually have the opportunity to heal. And so therefore, when we start to have those more integrative experiences where we meet our heart, where we settle our nervous system, then we're less likely to reach for the stuff that's going to do harm to our bodies. We're less likely to speak in a harmful way to others. We're less likely to harm the earth, animals, you know, all of these types of things. And actually, we're able to have a much more healthy system and a happy system from that place, versus continually rushing outside of ourselves, and putting ourselves in this constant fight or flight nervous system that actually has detrimental effects in the long term to our health. So it's like, it's like, you know, what am I putting in my body? How do I treat myself? How do I talk to myself? These types of things are so important for us to start to learn and understand, because the reverse of that is that we end up relying on things outside of ourselves. And Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
necessarily going to serve us.
No. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. This constant seeking for that which is external to us is now seeming like such a natural thing to do, you know, looking to everybody else to give us the answers as opposed to just coming within, going inwards and understanding what it is that your body is messaging you, how you feel, genuinely feel about something. So valid. Um, I also just wanted to say, just to highlight a part of your story that I think resonates with me so much, is the fact that the teacher training, your teacher training was the start of your evolution. Like you'd experienced a couple of little revelations and different ways of being, and you knew that the yoga in itself was creating a change physiologically. But it was the teacher training in itself that gave you a platform from which to spring off spiritually. And, you know, I experienced the same with mine. And I just think that that's such a beautiful, uh, um, it's a beautiful way to connect the dots between our stories as well. Because for me, you know, I hear this so much with people, is that I can't teach that because I don't know that. I can't teach, I'm a fraud. You know, this imposter syndrome seems to be such a big thing. And the reality is that nobody really knows until you're put in a position where you have to know. And by teaching something, it paves such a beautiful path for you because you feel responsible in the delivery of said thing, so much so that you take on the responsibility of embodying it in a way that maybe you wouldn't have done if you were simply the student. I mean, how many times do you go to a yoga class nowadays and even go, okay, for today, I'm going to be the student. Like I'm going to absorb the teaching as a student would versus I'm going to go with my teacher's hat on, because it's a very different experience, right? And you learn so many different things versus just coming at it from one lens. So if there's anybody who's listening to this who has done a yoga teacher training or a coaching program where they've been certified in something or anything like that, and they feel like they're struggling with imposter syndrome, just know that that is quite common. A lot of us who first start out with anything feel like they're struggling with that imposter syndrome. I'll speak for, you know, for myself here, in that the journey actually starts at the point where you are imparting or where you are being of service, where you are being in service of. And so don't cut yourself off at the knees by thinking that you're not enough and letting your not enoughness stop you from living out your Dharma. If that's something that you want to do, then find a way that you can integrate your teachings and the embodiment of those teachings and then offer that out to the world without feeling like you need to be perfect, because there's a newsflash here in that nobody is perfect. We just become better at our craft and learn more through experience. So I just wanted to make that very important highlight.
I love that. I've got a few things to say, if that's okay, on what you just said, because I think that's so true. I think so many people do not pursue their dreams because they feel like they don't know enough, or they aren't enough, or, you know, they're not good enough yet. Same. I'm like dealing with all of this stuff on a daily still, even, you know, 7 years on from teaching yoga and, you know, 5 years since going down the coaching route, for sure. And actually there's a real beauty in it, because actually if we don't feel like that, I feel like we're not growing. And so it's more to do with that relationship that we have to that, rather than it ever going away. I don't think it does go away. And the other thing I wanted to say on that is that a couple of other things was that when I came to the end of my yoga teacher training, I remember this profound moment, which finished the training, and there was a Swami and, you know, the doctor who taught us about anatomy and our main teacher, and we were doing our final ceremony. And I remember one of the teachers said, "And now your journey begins. Now, at the time, I was like, I want to get my yoga teacher training certificate so I can be a yoga teacher. I was like, what do you mean it's starting now? No, it's finished. Now I go and teach. Like, I didn't get it. And it wasn't for, a few years later that I was like, oh, I get it. This is now when I actually start to embody and actually start to live the yoga. This is when I start to not only incorporate it in terms of then teaching and imparting the knowledge and everything that I'm learning on the mat, and then using that as I'm teaching, but also in terms of how am I being as a human being, and then how do I embody these practices into my daily life. Like, that was, a huge thing. And the same with coaching. I was having a bit of a laugh with myself the other day, because I was creating a new program, and I had the program all kind of written out. I knew exactly what I was going to be coaching on, and these are topics that I've taught and talked about time and time again. But in every module that I was creating, I was back in the work for that module. So whatever the topic was, whether it was to do with burnout, whether it was to do with the mind, whether it was, to do with emotions, whatever the topic was, I was in that place. And all of my stuff came up to the surface again within those particular areas for me to then go deeper. And I had a laugh, because it was just the imposter syndrome. Was like, well, you're not perfect, yeah? So how can you teach on this? But I'm like, no, there's a beauty in that, because I can talk from lived experience. I can talk from what I'm learning and what I have learned, what the teachings say, but also talk about it not from I'm up here. I'm with you. So it's like taking away this teacher-student thing, but like, hey, we're in it together. And that's how I like to coach, is like, I'm far from being up there, and actually it's a beautiful place to be in, because then we're a lot more relatable.
Yes, this concept of going through the work at the same time of your students. I talk about this a lot in the programs that I run. I say this all the time. Like, I may be facilitating this work, I may be teaching you this body of work, but make no mistake, I am going through it with you. And so there are times where I also feel that resistance, or I feel something coming up about it, and then we get to discuss that together and go through the motions.
Yeah.
And it's not like I would ever use my students as a sounding board or space holders, but it creates a little bit of context for me to experience what they're going through, and provide a little bit of not only color around their experience, but also be able to hold the space in a way that is so solid, not afraid of what they're experiencing, because I've met myself there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of the crying and the darkness and all of those things, because I've been there. Maybe I'm even there, I can hold the space for myself in those times, and therefore for them as well. It's such a pertinent point you make.
I love that so much, Ari, because it's such a profound thing, because as we, as coaches and yoga teachers, as we go deeper within ourselves and we meet those really difficult dark shadows, those parts of self that maybe we weren't either aware that were there, or we have tried to avoid, the shames, the things like that. When we meet ourselves and hold the space for ourselves in those places, and we allow those emotions to be fully felt and accepted, and I think that's an important word, and accepted as part of the human experience, then we can hold that space for someone else, and we're not scared or frightened or trying to take their experience away for themselves, because, and I've had, and I'd love to hear if you've had this experience, but with family and with friends, and this is the difference between coaches versus your friends and family who haven't necessarily done this deep work on themselves, and everyone's on their own journey, right? But friends and family who love us, but they're so uncomfortable with seeing our pain that they'll try and take that pain from us, and we don't actually have the opportunity to sit with it and to feel it and to allow it to move through us.
Yeah. And I'm just feeling into that for a second, because what you've said is so powerful, because it's not only looking at it from the point of view of us being able to hold the space for the other, but also on how, when we are going through the experience, how those who are uncomfortable with our pain try to take it from us.
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge. And so how many times have I experienced that in my life? That's a really, really interesting way of looking at it. Yeah.
And they're most likely unaware that that's what they're doing, right?
Of course.
Yeah. But it's due to their own discomfort that then they're so uncomfortable because they've not necessarily met that part of themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge. I've always looked at it from the point of view, from my point of view, I suppose, but never from the opposite way. So a really good little nugget there for me to look at and process as well.
Awesome.
Thanks, darling.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
And and if I were to think about this on a global scale right now, and looking at it through the lens that you've just mentioned, wow, like that's happening everywhere. That's happening everywhere. I mean, you just need to turn on your social media apps and notice how everybody is trying to not only project their own wounds and traumas onto others, but also finding it so uncomfortable when others are sharing their own experiences that they feel the need to jump in and save them or make them feel better or protect them or whatever the case is. And it's something just dawned on me, is that one of the things that I've experienced in my time on social media, for those of you who don't know, like I used to be very, very against social media. I feel like I'm a grandmother in a young person's body, because I always used to think to myself that social media was the devil and I never knew how to work it, and it's all these things, and I don't really share that much about my personal life on social media, particularly pertaining to the times where I'm feeling confused or agitated or fearful or anything like that. And I think and I probably need to think about this a little bit more, but I think one of the reasons is because I don't want anybody to come in and take that from me. I want to have my experience with whatever it is that I'm going through and meet it and metabolize it and allow it to alchemize in me before anybody else has the opportunity to jump in and make me feel better, or hold up a mirror, or whatever it is that people want to do on social media. And I see it so much with my friends. They have these little disclaimers at the end of their stories, is like saying things like, don't worry, I'm okay. You don't have to jump in and offer any support. I'm just sharing something. And that just really ties very, very much into what you were just saying about that inability of someone else to hold your pain. Yeah, huge. Wow.
Totally. Yeah.
Thanks,
yeah
darling.
and I think as well, like, we live in a society that's all about the quick fix as well. So it's like, you got a headache, okay, take paracetamol. You feel like this, have this, rather than, okay, I feel like this, let me sit with that for a moment.
Right. What?
And for my own personal experiences, like, I've had some really profound moments of just taking the breath or taking that little bit of space. It's the same with, like, someone says something, okay, I don't have to react, whether it's on social media, whether it's, someone says it to your face, or, you don't have to respond or react straight away, you can take some time to take a breath, to take a pause. And that covers every single kind of aspect of our lives as well. And just taking that little bit of space. And I think there's another aspect of this, is that actually maybe the biggest gift that we can give ourselves is actually that pause, and realizing that the gifts are in the long game, not in this short-term fix. That actually, if we can be with an experience and not have an opinion about that experience, not to label it good or bad, and to allow it to be as it is. And obviously, I mean, look, you know, it's not easy stuff, this, you know, I totally get it. But even just to begin with a little pause, some little pauses through the day, that's where you start. That's where I started with, I had a meditation app, or like a mindfulness app, and I was at work, and I would set the app at certain times of day, and the app would go off, and the app would say, take 3 deep breaths, feel your feet on the earth, you know, come back into the body. And by doing that every day, I started to realize how out of my body I was. You know, it started as a small thing, but as time goes on, through practice, through consistency, then there's so many gifts. There's so many gifts in that for every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, it's a layered effect, one thing over the other. I was having a chat with a friend of mine the other night about this pause, about receiving, say, an email or a text message, and then not responding straight away, reading it, considering it, then responding. And he couldn't quite understand how I wouldn't respond, why I wouldn't respond immediately, you know. And it's really this practice that I have on trying to feel into how I want to respond. Of course, I'm not talking about the basics, you know, what do you want to have for dinner tonight, or whatever the case is, you know, but I'm talking about the other considered responses that we have a beautiful opportunity of giving someone. You know, if they come to us with something, we can respond in a way that's considered and that is kind and compassionate, rather than just responding for the sake of ticking something off the list. Such a big difference in the way you approach it. And what I loved what you said earlier was this relating to the pause, relating to the uncomfortable emotion that comes up, relating to imposter syndrome, all of these things that we're working with and trying to give space around. It's not so much the pushing up against or the fighting up against something. It's really finding the golden opportunity to relate to said thing in a way that's going to help you find equanimity, you know, the state of peace and calmness in your response to it. And I'm doing such beautiful deep work with this, relating to my relationship to everything, people, experiences, my breath, my body, my practice. You know, how do I show up for these things? What's my relationship to that thing, practice, person, spirit, guide, whatever it is, you know, energy.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Beautiful. So beautiful.
And I think as well, like, you know, just to kind of add to that is, you know, relationship too, but also what is my intention? And that's something that I've been working with a lot in my life over the last few years. And that's one of the reasons why I created my coaching program all about intention and purpose, is because when we are going in that kind of that hamster wheel of life, where we're caught up in doing the same thing every day, reacting the same way, eating the same thing, walking the same route, and it keeps going around and around and around. If we don't take a step to the side and look at how am I responding? How am I reacting? What am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? And actually, what is the conscious choice that I want to make in terms of how I am being and the intention I am placing on the things that I'm saying yes to and the no to, and all of that, having that sense of conscious choice, then we are essentially just reacting to whatever is occurring on our life. We actually then don't have agency, but having an intention that we're setting towards our life and the choices that we're making on a daily basis, then we have this sense of agency, and we can actually direct the ship of our lives from that intentional place, rather than allowing life to give us what it gives us. And that's not from a place of controlling the external, it's all an internal thing. And it's about how we feel, and it's about how we are being. And something that I have found in my own life is that, one, that's deeply healing, because I feel in alignment to self, because I know why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And when I fall off that, I know how to bring myself back. Not from a place of beating myself up, because I've built up practices to bring compassion. I know how to apologize when I fucked up. Sorry to myself. And I know how to work with myself around forgiveness as well, but then I always know then how to bring myself back, because I've met that place from that intentional place of knowing how I want to be in the world. And through mindfulness and all of this. And one thing that I wanted to say on that can really help people, because when I first started working with that, I was a little bit like, well, how do I work with intentions and all of that? Intention is almost like an energy. What is the energy that you want to bring to something? And one of the models that I like to use for this, and you've probably seen it, Ari, is the above the line and the below the line model. And around vibrational frequencies. And a really simple way to look at it is what I am doing, or what I'm saying yes to, is it coming from a place of love, or is it coming from a place of fear? And really tapping into, am I running away from something? Am I pushing it away because it feels uncomfortable and I don't like it? Or am I saying, am I saying yes because it makes me feel expansive? It feels right. It's in alignment with what's true to me, with my values and all of that. It's something that's good for me and good for the world.
Yeah. And everything that we've spoken about today, every single thing has all been about how, when things are uncomfortable and we haven't integrated it, and we don't know how to hold space for ourselves, or we're too fearful or frightened of what is happening with us, we project it and we run, and we just try and escape that one, sometimes challenging, yet that feeling. And what would life be like if you turned around and looked it straight in the face and just sat with it, whether it's the headache or the difficult yoga pose? Or the deep meditation practice. Any of those things, all of those things present us with the same divine opportunity. Integrate, embody, face, all of those things create that opportunity to alchemize. Yeah. Oh my gosh, babe, this has been such a juicy conversation. I just knew that this would serve those that are going to listen to this. I know that they're just going to find so much value. And for those of you listening, when we spoke about a brief, I basically said to Claire, listen, there is no brief. There's a couple of things that I just want to kind of touch on, but I just know that every time we jump on a call, something juicy comes out of it. So this is quite literally, except I probably swear a bit more when we're talking one-on-one, but generally this is kind of the feeling, the texture of our conversation. So thank you so much for being here. Guys, Claire has got a book coming out. I am so excited for this. Oh my gosh, she's got a book coming out on the 30th of July. Can you please tell us a little bit about this book, Claire, so that once it is published and released, everybody can go and grab themselves a copy?
Yeah, for sure. I'm super excited about it. But I just want to say I've loved this conversation as well. Like, it's been amazing and I've had so much fun. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
So the book is called Caged No More. And it's all about women who have broken free from societal constraints. And so it's a multi-author book. So there's, I think there's 16 of us who have written a chapter in the book. And my chapter is all about really breaking free, and it's my story as to, you know, how I realized
we just lost you there for a second. Claire, can you just tell us again quickly what your book is about, or the chapter that you've written in your book, Caged No More, which I'm going to be linking in the show notes of this episode. So
yeah, wonderful. Yeah, so my chapter is all about my story from being very much caught up in a way of living that was aligned with actually what society had told me was the right way to live and to live this happy life, but it blatantly wasn't making me happy. And it was my journey, my exploration into really what was true to me, and through all of the ups and the downs, and really what led me to India, what led me to study yoga teacher training, and everything that's happened since. And so it's really that story and that journey that I went through.
I can't wait to read it. What a cathartic process of writing that, which is something we will definitely talk about offline, because super interested in your process. And I can't wait. I'm so proud for you, because I know that this is going to be such an incredible part of your offering and the way that you can support people into making a more aligned decision for themselves and how they want to live their lives. So thank you in advance for writing this book, or this chapter in this book, because I know that it's going to touch the hearts of many.
Thank you so much, Ari. I really take all of that in.
I love you lots, babe. Thanks you guys for being here with us, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.